I talk to people that are extremely wealthy, multi-millionaires, and I'll ask them, okay, tell me your story. Tell me what your life's been in the last 5-10 years and what you've accomplished. And it's always business. Be willing to say to them, tell me what their journey was like. Can you tell me anything within that segment of those years, the journey of what your family was like? Anything exciting happened with your kids, your significant other? What about you? And guess what? You get a deadpan look. They can't tell you because they've been so ultra focused on hitting that goal. They never celebrated the journey along the way. They disconnected from family and it just got worse. I want business owners to know they have to have core values and they have to learn to live by them in order to have the most successful life they can. Otherwise, stay at your job.
No money millionaire, we here now. Used to dream broke, but it's clear now. No handouts, had to gear down. Now what they fear now. No money millionaire, we here now. Got scars, but I wear that crown. Turn pain to a real account. No money, no excuses, no limits loud.
Welcome back to the No Money Millionaire podcast, where we talk about building wealth, rewriting mindset, and creating opportunity from absolutely nothing. I'm Dave Webb, your No Money Millionaire. Today I'm sitting down with someone who built his entire life from the same place a lot of us are starting from, survival mode. My guest is Dwight Heck, founder of Give a Heck Financial, speaker, coach, podcast host, and someone who went from raising 5 kids alone under heavy financial pressure to becoming a leader in financial education and intentional living. Dwight, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So you talk openly about quiet desperation and the real version that people are living every day. So what did that actually look like before anything changed for you?
Well, quiet desperation is literally something that I experienced every day from the moment I got up till I went to bed. It would be in my dreams. It literally was quiet desperation for me was the fact that, I logged on to the bank account hoping to see a zero balance, right? I'd be happy if it was zero as opposed to being an overdraft or having to use lines of credit to try to support and survive in a very tumultuous time of raising children. Because at the end of the day, when you're a full-time parent, originally I was joint, and then I went into a full-time situation where I got full-time custody of them. I couldn't work as much.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet the needs were all there. So they'd come to me and, Dad, we need this for school. We need this for extracurricular activities. We need all this money. And it would be, oh, sure, I'll figure it out. And I'd have that mask on. I'd have that facade that I was presenting that many of us do. And I'd go to bed, live the day in it, but I go to bed and really be focusing. Unfortunately, my brain would be focusing on the negative and the quiet desperation of how am I going to pay for that? Oh my gosh, if I pay for this, now I got to rob Peter to pay Paul to do this next week. And am I going to be able to juggle between all these sources of credit in order to make it so that I can still pay the mortgage, pay the bills, get food on the table? And oh my goodness, I only got 2 appointments next week because I got to take 2 kids to doctor's appointments. So I can't do that during the day. Oh, I got to make sure they get to this. And all this stuff was clutter, right? Your brain plate can only handle so much and things were overflowing. And that quiet desperation was gripping me. And I didn't have a resolution of how to deal with it all, right? To go from a 6-figure income earner to half of that in a matter of time and getting them full custody made it even worse, right? That quiet desperation, it was just gripping that hamster wheel of life, go to work, go home, get paid. I couldn't even do that. So I lived for too long in that quiet desperation, not knowing how to get out of it. So when I got into my practice, I've worked on it since day one, right? Doesn't mean I don't go back into the valley of despair myself, but worked on simple tools to help me get past that quiet desperation, to realize that focusing on that, what my brain and what family and friends and society was pushing on me wasn't serving me, right? I had to decide what hills I was willing to die on. I had to develop boundaries with my kids. I had to sharpen my pencil with what I did and still do today with clients, which is consistent budgeting. I had to sharpen the pencil and I had to start putting boundaries in front of me to squash it, Does that quiet desperation totally go away? No, that's just would be unfair to even say that that happens. But you learn to get past it, recognize it, and then squash it. But it's still, you go through that emotional roller coaster sometimes still.
I was a single parent as well, and when I moved, I grew up in Detroit in the inner city, and I didn't want my son to grow up in the same stuff that I did. So I moved us to California. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have anything planned. I didn't know anybody out there. And I had $2,000 to my name. And so, and that, a big chunk of that had to go to my apartment as soon as I moved in there. So $600 went to my apartment. So it took me down to $1,400. I didn't have a job lined up. I had a 10-year-old son. And matter of fact, I even had his cousin with me, which he was 18 at the time. But going through that, trying to make sure that you're going to make ends meet, going to make sure everybody eats and all of that. I think I traumatized my son because I was, I learned that I could get at that time, I could get like for $5, I could get enough spaghetti that would feed all of us. And until I really had a job or had some income coming in, I did spaghetti. It was horrible. We did it night after night after night, but I knew it was a full meal. And I was able to do the $5 and it was enough for everyone to eat. And my son, he's tired. I don't think he wants to hear spaghetti these days, but, and I tell this, many times, I went through over 15 evictions trying to deal while I was trying to figure it out. And fortunately for me, my son would go back and visit his mother and my mother and the rest of his family during the summer. And it was during the summer where the sales dried up. I lived in the desert and it was a seasonal. And so everything would close at the time. So I didn't have any sales. And so my son was so young, he didn't really know what was going on. Like you said, you have that face, that mask on. He just knew every time he returned, it was into a new home. He didn't know why. He didn't know anything what was going on. I'm stressing and I'm trying to make it happen. And every time he would return, it was to a different home because I'd get evicted and it was cheaper for me to move into a new house than it was to actually catch up where I was. So, I think it's going to be a great, great episode. I can relate exactly with where you're coming from. And so, but you were raising 5 kids alone.
4 daughters and a son.
4 daughters and a son. And so trying to work nonstop, financially stretched. What was the moment you realized that you can't keep doing life this way?
Well, I guess the biggest moment that really hit me is when I went through getting custody of them, starting going through court battles, and they moved in with me. Courts approved the fact they didn't have to go back to their mom's house and that they were going to be staying with me. And then I'd say that it really hit me initially. It was like, I can deal with this, right? I can figure it out, right? I'm the fixer. I can figure this out. And I was so used to making a certain amount of money and only having them a week on, week off, like in joint, that I literally was still living the same lifestyle. I was still trying to live the same way, but now they're living here. So now my food costs have gone up, utilities have gone up, things that I didn't have to worry about prior are now added more financial burden. So initially the first 6 months, I guess it's like that romance phase of getting in relationships. Everything was through a different colored lens. So that colored lens all of a sudden started to drop. And I started realizing like, oh my gosh, all the people that I'm educating and working with and doing, I'm not even following that myself. I got lazy in my mindset. And that quiet desperation started getting louder and louder and louder. And I realized like, oh my gosh, I really need to suck it up and start practice what I preach. Right? Before I didn't have to. I made a good 6-figure income. I had the kids. The weeks I didn't have them, I worked my butt off so that I didn't have to do much appointments during the weeks that I'd have them. And it was workable. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it was workable. So when I first when the courts allowed them to come and stay not have to leave to go back. Initially, it was just like, it'll work out. Everything will work out. I'll be able to figure out how to work more, right? Enough to compensate, not thinking, well, you're the only person now. That's it. You're not getting income from your ex. I never did get money from her. Even after the courts approved it, took 3 years to prove everything and strip her of her rights. It didn't matter. I still had to, so much more on my plate. So it started in 2008, the initial creeping in of it. And then 6 months into it, going into 2009, it really was a slap in the face to have to log on. As I mentioned, I'd log on to my bank account. And that's one of my talks I give on stage is why 2008 was the worst year of my life. And it talks about the fact of me forgetting what had got me where I was that compassion and care for everybody else, but I wasn't having it for myself. And that's the first failure we make as in single parents, single dads, as we forget to love on ourselves. That if we're not strong emotionally and mentally, it affects absolutely everything. We forget to prioritize ourselves, just like they say, put the oxygen mask on first in a plane. Why?
Right.
It's the same thing. I wasn't doing that to myself.
Okay.
It was just a real slap upside the head to me and a realization. And then I had to climb out of that circumstance because in 6 months I got in a heck of a lot of debt. I was literally robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'd get disconnection notices. Okay, you're gonna get your power disconnected. And I literally I'd pay them, but then I wouldn't pay this other utility because I didn't have the money. You know what I mean? And then I'd wait for a disconnection from them. And I went through that. And the food things that you talked about, I went through that. I literally, dude, I was that person too, just like you. But my kids would go, Dad, you didn't take very much. Oh, I'm not feeling great. So I'm not that hungry.
Right.
So that they could have more.
I understand.
Right?
Yeah.
And I did that for a long, long time. And as adults now, they realize the sacrifices that I made. And when I look back and I remember my mom being like that when I was very young, when my dad was struggling and getting his business started. I remember my mom would say, "Oh, I'm full. Go ahead. Go get that extra pork chop or go have an extra serving of vegetables, whatever. I'm good. But she wasn't. She was, as a parent, putting herself behind the line and putting everybody else in front. But in reality, us as kids wouldn't have died. We didn't really need that extra help. When you only need so many calories a day, she should have been putting her mask on first. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. Of course it does. But, that's like you said, you did it for your children and yeah, I understand. I can relate with everything you're saying so much. I went through such crazy times. I had to move. One of the evictions or one of the times my son returned to a new home was because the utility company, I got so far behind and they turned me off, but they refused to turn me on with like any type of payment plan until I paid it in full. And I had to I hooked an inverter to my car and ran extension cables all through the house. And when my son would have to wait there with no power in the house until I finally came home from work and we connected to the car, and then he'd be able to have lights and everything in the house. And I eventually had to move out of that house. I could not get the utilities turned on. So I can relate 1,000,000% with what you're talking about and what you're going through. But your turning point, was it tied to a health scare that you experienced and a friend inviting you into finance, but not to sell, but to learn?
Well, I had a massive health scare. So when I got into the financial services industry, I was a computer consultant. I owned a computer consulting firm. I would get hired to do big corporate jobs, and I was a workaholic because my dad was, and I fell into that trap. So when I didn't have the kids, because I was already divorced, but I ended up just before September 11th, actually, the towers, I ended up having a health scare, and shortly after September 11th, it kept on getting worse. And I won't get into all the details of it, but in 2022, I had 2021, pardon me, I had somebody reach out to me. I'd already reached out saying, you know what, you're a 6-figure income earner. I've known you for 27 years. you're shitty with money, right? I wasn't in the industry yet. He says, you're crappy with money. You need to, he says, I think you should come into our industry. I know you've been having some health scares and, you know, I won't get into the details of what it was. I was constant headaches. I was just sick all the time. And neurologists and specialists said it's because you're not taking care of yourself, right? Signs way back then that it didn't really take serious, except for the fact that professionals are pushing it. You need to slow down. You need to leave that industry. Working 110, 120 hours a week when there's only 160 hours in a week is ridiculous. You're putting too much on yourself, and that's why your body's failing. You're not eating properly. You're not sleeping right. And my buddy knew about this stuff because we were friends. Well, he left his industry and got into finance and said, hey, I think, you know, we'll train you. First off, we're going to get your nightmare in order, right? We're going to get your disaster in order. And then with your qualities of dealing with people, your compassion, your relationship skills, we're going to help you. You know, we're going to work with you to get into the industry so that you can help others, because you'll have this perfect story, the perfect life in regards to being empathetic and supporting people. So I literally poo-pooed him. Right?
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm not interested in this right now. I've got, you know, I'm feeling a little bit better. I got another couple contracts from my consulting firm for IT, like for computers, and I'll be fine. Well, my health wasn't getting any better. I was miserable. I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. Long story short, I reached out. He introduced me to somebody in my local province in Alberta, and I went and sat with them, and I heard them out. And I said, okay, give me the courses. What do I do? Well, this is going to take you 5 to 6 months. I said, I don't have 5 to 6 months. What are the courses? What do I take? This was on a Thursday. Where do I register to write? Well, he says, you can't. Why would you care about that right now? This is going to take you months. I said, no, I don't have months. And this is a true story. So I ended up picking up on Thursday the books and stuff, paid him for them, because at that time they were allowed to register you, and because he was part of a brokerage. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And he just sort of chuckled. The next morning, I got up on a Friday. I went to the provincial registry. So for those that are American, a state office. And I went and I paid the fee to write the exam Monday morning at 8:30. So this is Friday morning. I've got books. I got books that I swear to you, if I had pictures of them, would blow your mind. They were inches thick. And there was multiple ones that I had to research. And that was my joint custody with my kids week, right?
Oh, wow.
So I went to Blockbuster.
Okay.
People know Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Went to the cheap section and got all the dollar movies, as many as I could, because they were, you know, the older movies.
Right.
And loaded up on VHS. And I literally got my kids from school that Friday afternoon, went back to my place and started plugging tapes in, except for taking breaks to feed them. They're at what, and they were young. My youngest was like so young that she's sitting beside me, and then I literally had them surrounding me, and I started studying. Right, have my little guy was the youngest. I can't even remember how old he would have been at the time too. And we literally, there's the kids still remember it. The older ones remember it. I was studying in the book. Having kids, at one point in time, one would be in my lap and the book would be here, and I'd have one on each side, and the older one, she'd be over on one of the older love seats I had. And okay, change the movies so Dad doesn't have to get up, right? Go put another one in. You guys want snacks? Okay. The older daughter, thank goodness, she was very helpful. She was a lot older, right? 12, 13. I said, go do this, help Dad out. And I dropped them off. The way our drop off was 8:30 Sunday night. I dropped them off for their mom's time. And I got home and I had barely had any sleep that weekend. And I stayed up from 8:30 until the next morning and never went to sleep. And I studied. I crammed and crammed and crammed. I went in, wrote that at 8:30 in the morning, passed it. They had never seen that happen. And I went into the office where the guy sold me the books that was introducing me to this industry some more. And he said to me, he says, I had it behind my back, because back then it was a piece of paper. I had it behind my back, and he says, that's okay, Dwight. He got up, maybe next time, put his arm around me, because I'd already told him and let him know that I was writing Monday, and he thought I was crazy. I says, what? I have to write it again? And I brought it out, and his face dropped.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah, so I ended up, that's how I got started into the industry. It took a couple months. By September 19th of 2021, I was literally licensed, and, licensed to do damage, licensed to help, whatever you want to say, right? Because I was still green. I had a lot to learn. But that's how I got in, because of my health scare. And literally, it changed my life and changed my trajectory. And did it stop me from being a workaholic? Not necessarily. The first few years, I worked my butt off because it took me forever to even get close to what I used to make as a consultant, right? So that was the sick part of my life that you mentioned. And that's how I got into the IT industry, because I had doctors and like a neurologist himself, saying, if you don't get out, you're not going to make it. You're going to be done. You're going to snap. You're going to crack.
So, yeah, no, that's amazing. Amazing that you were able to do that. I took a test for selling insurance when I was younger, and it was the life, accident, and health, and you had to learn annuities and everything. And that was a 1 week course. It was, I mean, it was a crunch. Some people take longer, but I wanted it like you. I wanted it as quickly as I could. So I found this. It was a crunch course, and I did it. And I went. And while I was in the classroom, there was people who were in there from like Edward Jones and others who had already taken their Series 9 and different financial, to be brokers and whatnot. And they were talking about how difficult it was. And that's the only thing I can kind of relate it with what you're saying. But yeah, that took me a solid week to get through that and to be able to take that test. And that was a crunch. I couldn't imagine just trying to put it all into a couple days over the weekend with 5 kids. Couldn't imagine. So
it was character building.
It sounds like it. And speaking of that, you talk about training yourself so you don't have bad days, just bad moments. And that's a huge, mindset shift. And so can you break down how people can start doing that for themselves?
Yes, sure. Absolutely. For me, it's going to be going on to 8 years that I haven't had a bad day. And part of that has to do with the fact of our brain is a giant computer. It doesn't know the difference between the truth or a lie, right? It just doesn't. It's what we program it. It's what we tell ourselves. It's our associations. So it also ties into a fact of something I call the 70-30 principle, which if we have a moment, I'll talk about that in a couple seconds. So how do I not have a bad day? Well, I acknowledge, right? It's been proven that 45 seconds to a minute, that's all you have to do to acknowledge your mindset and your thoughts that are creeping in from either outside external forces or forces that you're putting into your brain through social media, through traditional media, what you read, emails, whatever. We need to acknowledge that trigger. And once we acknowledge that trigger, what are you doing to stop that trigger? Well, what do most people say? They automatically have one thing happen. Let's say it's 3:00 in the afternoon. They've had an awesome day and something bad happens. Their first societal response would be, oh, I had a bad day, when somebody asks them at 5:00, how was your day?
Yeah.
How was your day, Dave? Oh, it sucked. Oh, really? So I used to say to people, including myself, I'd say, well, oh, that's unfortunate. So can you tell me, before whatever happened that caused this, what was your day like? Did you just give me a rundown? They start saying stuff and I'd say, well, what would you do to change that? They don't have a clue. I said, well, are you grateful when you wake up in the morning? What do you mean grateful? Do you open your eyes and go, oh my goodness, I have been blessed with another day? For me, I'm God-fearing, so thank you, God, for allowing me to wake up today. I appreciate another shot. Welcome you into my day. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to slay the day, to serve myself, to be healthier mentally, physically, whatever, and in order to serve others, my kids, my clients, right? My family in general. So that's how I started doing it, was things from reading books and people telling me different things. I pieced together the fact that I needed to have more gratefulness. Now, if something happens and I'm having a character building moment in the day, I do what most of us wish we could do. I time myself out, because I've learned how to time myself out. As kids, we hated it. Today, I will literally leave my computer and I do different things. I'll change my association of what my brain is thinking about by either putting on a positive podcast. I'll listen to a book. I listen to books more than I read. I'll put it on a good book with Audible. I'll reach out to a friend or somebody that I know that I have an option to either they're just going to listen or they're going to listen and give me advice, right? There's different options. And I know these people and I can reach out and say, hey, 911, I need to have something broken down because it's really bothering me and it's affecting my day. And I'm not telling my brain that I'm having a bad day. I'm having a character building moment. I've trained my brain. Your character building moment. You can get by this, right? You can get past this. Sometimes it's really traumatizing and it's not that simple. Then I unpack it with somebody so that they can dial me back going, okay, you still have the rest of your day. You can deal with this later. You don't need to let your mindset control you right now. And you don't have to ever say to yourself, oh, I have a bad day, and discount the fact that I woke up, discount the fact that I have food in the fridge, that I have running water, that I have great people that I can associate and talk to like you. So it's training the brain to disconnect. And I always give myself a time frame. Here's why. And I train this in my life coaching side of my business, along with my financial clients. I train them to give themselves a time of how long they're going to allow that bad moment to stick with them. Some people it's 5 minutes. Some people it's an hour. I give myself a 3-hour window, and people say, well, how can you do that 3-hour window? What happens if you have other things booked? I said, I give myself that 3-hour window because if I have the opportunity to take that 3 hours, I might do multiple things that I've talked about. I might listen to a podcast, listen to a chapter of a book, plus make that call. Because if it's bad enough and I have the opportunity, I want to rein that in because people are going to respond and need me to be the best version of myself. So I need to understand how can I make it so that I don't let that little thought creep in that I had a bad day and discount the fact that, wow, I had this amazing podcast conversation with Dave earlier today, and that was fantastic. What's happening right now is just a little snapshot of stress, anxiety. I need to squash this. And I need to, sometimes it's as simple as going and having a power nap. And I literally, my brain's gotten so good at it. I'll close my eyes. I'll lay back, right? I don't go to my room, but I lay back in like a reclining chair and I put blinders on. So the room is dark. Sometimes I'll tell my Google to play some music, maybe some instrumental violin music, something, whatever. I'll just lay back and I'll tell myself in 45 minutes from now to an hour, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to feel better. And I'll tell myself that numerous times and I don't even have to set an alarm. And I drift off, even if it's just surf sleeping, you know what I mean? You don't go in deep sleep, you're just surf sleeping and my body relaxes because I've told it, this is your time to get back to your center, back to your core. And I'll snap out of it 45 minutes to whatever I tell my brain. And I'm just like, oh man, I feel so much better. Did that circumstance go away? No, it's still there. But my body needed to reset itself. I needed to give my body an opportunity to have that pressure release, right? So I have different things that I'll utilize. And in that 3-hour window, if I don't have anything, if it's a paperwork pushing window after this, whatever caused that, and I have that 3 hours, I'll take as much opportunity as I have. Sometimes that's 20 minutes, dude. And then the next time it's 2 hours. But I care enough about myself to realize that even if I have an appointment 2 hours from now and I'm not, I'll literally reach out to people and say, you know what, something's come up. And I need to reschedule. And depending on who it is, I'll be really honest with them. And other people, you don't need to be. You don't need to share everything that's inside of your closet, inside of your doors of your life. You're just being honest. Something has come up. Well, what has come up is you're not lying to them. Something has come up. You care enough about yourself and you mostly care about them too, that knowing if you get on that call with them or you're going into a vehicle to drive to a meeting, you're not going to be at 100%. And that's not fair to anybody. So learning boundaries is part of that protection mechanism, right? Hopefully that makes sense what I was telling you.
It does. And you had mentioned something that I was going to, ask about. You teach something called the 70-30 principle, and it's about relationships and associations. What does it look like when real life, and what is it? Why does it matter so much?
Well, why it matters so much is we constantly give people too much rope. We constantly give people too much to control our lives, they live rent free in our head, like that saying goes. How do we deal with that? Well, here's an example. So I go into a circumstance and you're across the room in this conference or in this meeting, and I see you and I smile. Maybe it's not physical right away. Maybe I feel it I get the warm and fuzzies, and I'm so excited to see Dave. 70% of the time, I love seeing Dave because what Dave has to add to my life or say, and this doesn't even have to be face to face. This can be in writing, social media. Maybe you do a newsletter, or I follow you and we communicate. 70% of the time, no matter what I read, hear from you, other people say to me, I'm like, I like Dave. He's so good. 30% of the time, there's times when Dave says stuff that's kind of, I like Dave. We're not necessarily on that same page.
Okay.
But I still respect him enough to walk away and still respect Dave and can't wait to see him again. So it's only 30% of the time, right? That's the max I'll allow it. And I do assessments on relationships all the time based on this. And then Dave will, what he had to say that I didn't agree with, if it's ever morally apprehensive and totally against my core values, which I live by, which tie into everything, I literally walk stage right and they walk stage left. I'll take the fork in the road. I'll continue on the path of development and growth and leave that negativity to go walk off a cliff. All right. And so, and if it ever gets to a point though, when I analyze the circumstances of the relationship, and I shudder when I see an email, let's say I'm on their email list or their social media post, or I run into them, or I'm on a mastermind call and I hear them open their mouth and remove all doubt. And I can explain that statement too. And I literally shudder 50% of the time or more. It's time to leave that circumstance. If somebody isn't making me feel good about myself, it affects that bad day scenario too, right? That bad moment, character building moments.
Yeah.
And I have to learn what's triggering that. And if it comes back to a person and I start applying that 70-30, I'll look back at let's say 5. We'll use 5 as an example. Times that I've experienced them through anything, social media, newsletters, face-to-face, masterminds, video call, whatever. I literally will filter them through that and realize that you're not serving me. I don't care. I've let go of clients. I've let go of family relationships that if it hits 50-50, it's time for us to not be associated with one another. And sometimes it's impossible. People say, well, what about family? I teach them simply, you know what? You can't necessarily divorce yourself from your family that way. So family events, you go a half hour before, visit, small talk, eat your meal, have your dessert, stay for 30 minutes longer, and you exit stage right. Why aren't you staying very long, Dwight? Well, I have plans. And I've had people say, well, that's a lie. What plans do you have? It's not a lie. I have a plan not to keep myself in this situation where I feel my anxiety and stress go up, where I'm afraid every time they open their mouth that I'm going to have to go like this and hold my lips so I don't, I puke inside my mouth instead of externally. Do you know what I mean? So it gets to a point where you learn to not lie, but tell a truth that is a truth. Oh, I got plans. It's not that I don't have plans. I do have plans. I have plans to take care of myself, and that's okay, right? So sometimes you have those people you can't filter out with the 70-30 and just get rid of, but you can limit your time with them. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So does that make sense? The 70-30 principle is just basically, Dave better make me smile more than he makes me cry or cringe cringe, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Very simplistic rule.
InvestorFi, the #1 lending source for first-time and early-stage investors. Just learned how to find your first deal? Let's get it funded. InvestorFi, the only no-money millionaire certified lender. Find us at InvestorFi Lending or visit our website at investorfilending.com. InvestorFi, turning new investors into trained professionals. What are you waiting for? Schedule your free review today.
Being aware and kind of taking an assessment of what you're involved in. A lot of us just go through just so blindly. We're not really, the problem that I find with people is they're not really present. They're either thinking too far ahead. They're not in the moment. And I think, the more that you can ground yourself and be in the moment, you can start being more in tune with the 70-30 rule instead of, but that's what I find. I find a lot of people are not really in the moment so much. That's something, how I look at it. And
Well, who teaches self-awareness? Who teaches you to be self-aware? Who teaches you when you get up to be grateful before you swing your feet out of bed to leave, to be grateful that you opened your eyes, to be grateful that you can go in. People laugh at me. Well, run through some of your gratefulness. I'm grateful I get to go in and have running water, that I get to brush my teeth, that I have toothpaste. Why would you? Because those little things are appreciation for the fact that so many people don't have that. Well, I don't care what other people have. Well, I do. I appreciate the fact of what I have that they don't have. So that makes me more grateful. I go to bed at night. I have self-awareness. Oh, today I had that moment. I dealt with it enough to get past it, but I need to deal with that character building moment that caused me to have that angst. And then I also have on the flip side, today I will. I had such great conversation with Dave. It was such a good conversation. Thank you, Lord, for bringing that person into my life, for allowing me to speak my truth. Maybe I helped one person. Thank you. I look forward to tomorrow. And with this character building stuff that I just talked to you about, God, right? Because my gratefulness is involved in prayers. That's just me. I'm not against people that aren't God-fearing, right? I don't care what you worship. Worship trees, worship whatever. I don't care. As long as you have gratefulness for the fact that you have more than other people. And from that gratefulness, when I go to bed, I tell myself, thank you. I look forward to tomorrow. I hope you allow me to wake up, right? So that I have another shot to deal with that circumstance that caused that character building moment maybe better. But if I'm not aware and I don't analyze that stuff and you compartmentalize and shove it back into your brain, it eats away at you. Your health gets worse. Your sleep quality is terrible, right?
no, of course. It's, people take too much for granted. They do. They just take too much for granted. It's down to, like you're saying, having toothpaste, and going through some of the struggles like that you've mentioned you've went through, just being grateful that you're not waking up in the morning cringing that you have to check your bank account to see where it is. There's just so many things to be grateful for. There really are. So so raising 5 kids and doing it alone, I mean, that had to have taught you more, than some, business book. What did fatherhood teach you about leadership, discipline, resilience, things like that?
Oh, fatherhood taught me a ton because on top of all this, over the years, I learned that I'm an empath too, which for those that don't understand, search up what an empath, and I was a giant antenna. I picked up on all the emotions and all the strife, good, bad, and ugly from my kids. And it taught me to what business books won't necessarily tell you, but they talk about the fact of having boundaries and talking age appropriately to your kids about things so that they, don't poo-poo them and say you're better to just to listen. We don't want to hear you. Your opinions don't matter. Have conversations with them about things like needs and wants and being resilient. Oh, okay. You want this? Or is it a want or a need? Let's have this conversation based on their age. Or, let's say it was something they come home and they were all upset. Or if I was picking them up when they were younger, before they started taking the bus, picking them up and they'd be blah, 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 blah. Is this something Dad's not at a point in my mental capacity at this moment that I can deal with this right now? So if it's urgent, we'll push through it enough to deal with it later. But if you can wait till after supper, or you can wait for an hour, and it wouldn't even have to necessarily be in a vehicle. We could get in the house and then it would happen, right? And I'd say to him, okay, Dad's going to start supper. You can stand here and talk to me about some of this if it's 911. If it's not, can we wait until after supper? When such and such is starting their homework, you and I will go and talk somewhere and you can share what we need to work on together. So I started creating boundaries with him. I started saying to him, this circumstance of what you're talking about is important to Dad, but it's not important right now in my mindset. So tell me why it's important right now. right? Why it needs to be addressed immediately, and I'll listen to you. But I still have the last say, but you have input into what that last say is going to be is based on. And I was teaching him to be more learn how to communicate better, to get across their thoughts with with less drama, more facts. And obviously there's drama and emotion in all logic. There is.
Yeah.
And they, like, oh, Dad, we need this and this and that. Well, here's what I see. That sounds to me like it's a want, not a need. Okay, the floor is yours. Tell me why it's a need. Explain to me why it's a need, right? And they'd get to a point where it wouldn't be, oh, such and such has it at this extracurricular, at dance and gymnastics, at soccer, at baseball. Because remember, they're all in stuff, right? And I'd say, okay, that's nice for them. Maybe their family's in a different circumstance. Unfortunately, we're going to be short money this month. Well, how do initially, well, what do you mean? The younger ones, you couldn't explain it. The older ones, well, here, you want to see the budget? What? So what does that say down there? Minus 200. Well, why do we have minus 200? This broke down this month, or this happened in our lives, or, next month we'll have a little bit more. Now, if it's a need, I'll put it on credit because next month I know I can pay it off. Is it right? So, but I said, if it's not a need, and it doesn't need to be even a want that we do next month. That extra money next month can be a cushion for the month after, which is going to be short again. You don't know that it's going to be short, but something possibly could happen when you have 5 kids to worry about. And that's literally how I discussed. So it gave me a realization. It allowed me to be very resilient because I'd sit and say to them, they got to a point, Dave, where they'd say to me, blah, 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 we need to do this or we should do that. And they'd look at me and they'd start saying to me, oh, we're just talking about what we'd like to do in the future, Dad. This is just a conversation. Or they roll their eyes and go, yeah, we know it's a want, not a need. They wouldn't even finish the statement and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as adults, it drives them nuts. My son, who's 26, my youngest, he says to me a few days ago, he says, I was talking to somebody and blah, 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 blah. And I looked at him and said, is that a need or a want? And I smiled. I didn't say to him why I smiled. He didn't catch me smiling, but I smiled because he's a mini me of me in that way. And so are some of my daughters. Not all of them. Do you think everything I taught stuck with all my kids? No way.
Well, I'm sure a lot of it has.
But that's always there. It's always there.
Yeah.
What would that's another thing. I have clients and friends, and I'm not saying this to brag, but I used to always was taught by somebody else. Whenever I was caught in a difficult situation and I didn't have that person to reach out to, we didn't have the technology today, I'd say, well, what would that person do in this circumstance? So I started telling them, what would Dad do? So I have agents in my brokerage over the years. They were always wondered how they should deal with stuff in their personal lives. And I trained them on all this stuff at 70-30 and wants and needs and stuff. And they go, it would drive us nuts. We're thinking about this. And in my head would pop, what would Dwight do? And I said, good. Because that's a trigger for your brain that maybe there's not a truth. Maybe you're not having the right truth.
And it's just nice to look at something from a different perspective as well. Take yourself out of it, kind of, look at it from another angle always is helpful as well. So, so now with business, entrepreneurs, we love to trap ourselves in our own creations. How do you coach people to build a business that serves their life instead of consuming it?
The first and foremost with business people is, especially like I've dealt with so many people in 24 years, helping them set up businesses or helping them decide to stay at their job, right? It's all about knowledge and as much fact as possible because it's still going to be emotional decisions. So with most business people, I'll tell them once we go through that and they justify that and we see, we go through all the numbers, we know they're going to struggle the first few years, but eventually they'll start reaping the rewards of their hard labor. I'll ask them what their core values are. And most people have no clue what core values are. And I've been living by core values my whole life. Some people have a dozen core values. Some people have 6 core values. Some companies plaster it on the wall and expect the employees to work by it, but they don't work by it. You know what I mean? It's like, see what I do, don't do what I,
right.
do what I say, but don't do it.
Yeah.
monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah.
So I want them to have their core values in place to understand that, okay, you're going to have to initially put in way more hours when you start the business. You're going to work more hours than you did at your job. You're going to have way more stresses because your staff, if your company needs staff, is going to get paid before you, your overhead, all the things where you used to work that were dealt with by the owners of that business are now your responsibility. What do you have? Like, so we've gone through all this. What's your backup plan? Can you fund things if you know you struggle, or maybe as you're getting a momentum going, getting clientele, customers, you still have to worry about core values in the sense of, are you spending time with your family? Because one of the number one causes of divorce, not just in North America, like the US, Canada, the world itself, is financial stress. And it's the fact that that financial stress drives people away from sharing with their family or working more hours because they think that's going to get them out of their financial stress, when their financial stress could have been de-stressed by spending time on the journey of watching their family grow up, not missing that extracurricular activity, not missing that Christmas concert, that birthday, because they are feeling pressure to continually work. Maybe that'll help them get past this hump faster. Right. So I want them to understand your path and journey has to, for me, my core values are faith, family, and work. If my faith is not strong, I am not able to plug into my family. I'm not currently present all the time. Right. So my faith has to be strong, that tomorrow is another day, that tomorrow is another opportunity for things to work out with work, with family, whatever. Today is the present journey. Am I enjoying the journey? So, Mr. Business Owner. So it could be people I sit down that have been in business for 10 years that are just, they're workaholics. Their business is okay, but they're miserable. They've gone through, they're in a separation, or their marriage is about to break up, or they're going into divorce. And it's usually always because they forgot the journey of life. That money is supposed to serve us, right? We're not supposed to, money is supposed to help us. But you should not be chasing that money constantly. Even some of them that are successful don't realize that they didn't need, they can take the foot off the gas. Doesn't mean I want their business to collapse. I want them to say, okay, this is what I need. I'm reaching this. I can still grow, but I can free up a bunch of this time where I'm working evenings, working on the weekends. I'm making enough money now. I can hire somebody to do all the books. I don't need to do them. I can hire somebody to do this. I don't need to be the master of everything. And I can get back to dialing in family, my faith, so that I feel strong and good about myself. And if things are going on, what is my priority? Now, if my bills are covered and I got a little bit of a cushion, that's where it should be. My faith in my family should be first and foremost. And those little journeys, like I talk to people that are extremely wealthy, multi-millionaires, and I'll ask them, okay, tell me your story. Let's get really vulnerable here before we talk about anything to do with your business, your money. Tell me what your life's been in the last 5-10 years and what you've accomplished. And it's always business.
Rough course.
It's not accomplishment. Oh, my son did this. My daughter did this. My wife, my husband, whatever. It's always focused on business. And I'll say, okay, so you accomplished that. Congratulations. That's quite the achievement. And be grateful that you had the opportunity to be gracious in your compliments. Always be a person that's genuine. If you're going to say, oh, that's a great accomplishment, but then be willing to say to them, tell me what their journey was like. How many years did it take you? 3 years, 5 years, whatever. What's the journey like? Can you tell me anything within that segment of those years, the journey of what your family was like? Anything exciting happened with your kids, your significant other? What about you? Is there anything outside of work? And guess what? You get a deadpan look. They can't tell you because they've been so ultra focused on hitting that goal. They never celebrated the journey along the way. They disconnected from family and it just got worse. So, I want business owners to know they have to have core values. They have to be connected to those values and filter everything through those core values. And if they learn to filter everything through the core values, then they can tell me their journey is involved in this, and that. They still got to their goal. And I'll say to them, so if that goal took you an extra year, and you think of all that freed up time and it took you an extra year, but you understood the journey of your kids' lives, and you're telling me now your kids are teenagers and they want nothing to do with you. And that's typical. A lot of teenagers are like that. but that they have disdain for you, that they never find time for you, there's usually something that happened that caused that in your life, right? So we analyze that, and I tell business owners they have to have the core values and they have to learn to live by them in order to have the most successful life they can and still have a successful business. Otherwise, stay at your job.
So, Dwight, entrepreneurs love to trap themselves in their own creations. So, how do you coach people to build a business that serves their life instead of consuming it?
Well, most often when I'm coaching entrepreneurs on how to live a life that is balanced, which balanced living is almost impossible, right? Everybody says, well, you have to live a balanced life. Well, what you do is you try to work a life that works for me on core values. And core values are something that is literally a filter for me to stay on task. And what I mean by that is so many entrepreneurs today succeed at doing something, whether it's 6 months, a year, 6 years, whatever. And when I talk to them about, their focus and what was their drive, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is money. Obviously, we have bills to pay. We have to support our families, and we might have staff or employees. If we're not a solo entrepreneur, maybe we're an entrepreneur that has lots of staff. And we're so focused on the big picture of making money to please other people, meaning pleasing, oh, the business is doing really well, you're doing really good. And at the end of the day, they forget about the most important part of their life, the foundation of their life, which is, for me, is my faith and my family, which are the top two of my core values, which are faith, family, and work. Obviously, those core values have subcategories that I follow, but those are my three cores. So when I'm coaching entrepreneurs about staying focused on driving business, but not missing the journey, I'm always asking them questions, building that relationship and saying, okay, I understand what you're saying. You need to make money, right? You have a lot of people counting on you, including your family. But what have you sacrificed? Tell me the last big goal you've accomplished. And they'll tell me, I'll say, well, tell me what happened in between that goal. And they'll say, what do you mean? Well, what happened within your life in regards to family? Was there anything that was monumental? Something small. Maybe you went to a dance competition for a daughter, or gymnastics, or maybe you went to baseball, or maybe you went to a hockey game. Maybe you had this family event that was very, exciting for you that happened with all that. And if they can't tell me anything, I'll say, well, what was there nothing that happened? Oh yeah, sure there was, but I gave up birthdays. I gave up this Christmas concert. I gave up all these different things because the business needed me. So they prioritize their core values based on money and a business, which is an inanimate object, needing them. When in reality, their business would flourish more if they had that connection, that grounding to their core values, to their faith, their family. And again, faith doesn't have to be religious. It's faith in that things will work out. Faith that tomorrow is another day. Today is the present. What journey am I learning from today? Like, what am I actually creating as a memory so that I feel joyful and glad, so that tomorrow when I'm back focused on business, I have that connection, that grounding to my faith, my family, that things are always going to work out as long as I keep them first and foremost, the most important thing in my life. So I coach people that it's simple conversations that people will say, well, what's the magic formula? There isn't. Everybody's different, like their fingerprint. So I need to find out what makes them tick and then bring them back to, oh my gosh, I did this over the last year and I missed all these things. I sacrificed so much when I could have done both. If I would have had something grounding me, a formula, or somebody where I could reach out to like Dwight and say, hey, I find myself slipping back into that workaholic and I'm missing the journey. I keep on thinking about what we talked about months ago and I'm missing all these little things. I can't tell you anything exciting that happened. I can say, oh, I started here and here's my win. That's not good enough. You don't know on the way to the win if you lose your life, if a tragedy occurs, right? So enjoy every day and focus on having core values. And I help them build their own core values. Some people have 9, 10. It doesn't matter what they are, as long as they're meaningful to you and you actually try to use your life to filter through those so you don't miss the journey of life.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that myself. Even though I'm in the present, my mind is always thinking of what I have to do, what I'm going to do, what's going on. And I'm really not actually present. And so I'm going through these days, but I'm always thinking of tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's tough, brother. I don't want any of your listeners or people that, are really listening closely, intently, just to think that I'm perfect. I have the hills of, the hills and the valleys. I go into the valley of despair, and then I'm at the hill of excitement. And sometimes that excitement overrides me, and I'm going, okay, I hit this. Okay, next. And I don't even celebrate the win, let alone the journey up to the win. And it's so easy to get caught. And it's what I feed myself. What associations am I feeding myself with people in my life that I communicate with, that I follow, that I read their information, that are based on me? Somebody that I can follow. Maybe they're farther in their journey. Maybe they're farther behind in their journey, and their journey tells me what I shouldn't do and what I should do, if that makes sense, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So it's always good to have that awareness, to look at other people in business, have conversations, and ask those tough questions properly, of course, right? Ask those questions properly, because people get very sensitive when you start talking to them about their journey of life, right? You don't want to criticize, you want to understand, and then actually have that conversation to help them realize themselves. Realization happens internally. If we slap somebody and say, this is your realization, you should have done this, and what do? Our amygdala kicks in, and we want to fight, flight, flee,
Right.
flee,
Yeah.
right? We don't want to.
Yeah.
So it's important to care, have empathy, talk to people as an entrepreneur, or even somebody that's in a career that's not an entrepreneur. It works all the same. Don't get caught up in, look what that person's doing. That's what I want to do, right? That's what I want to be. Okay, maybe there's good points of what they are and what you want to be. But look at their social media of some of these people. What do you see? Do you see any pictures of family? Do you see them on a trip? Do you see them enjoying life? Or is it always just go business? And I'm guilty of that too. The difference is I'm guilty of not posting it. But if you looked at my phone, and God is my witness, I literally have thousands of pictures of my grandkids. I just don't post some of that personal stuff. It has to be once in a while I get in the mood and post stuff. But I'll ask people, well, okay, you don't post about it. If I don't see it, I'll ask, tell me about your family. What excites you? You know what I mean? It's to make them have that realization, like you just said, and being honest with ourselves is the first step, right? I am guilty of that myself.
Yeah.
Dwight, I am guilty of that myself. Difference is I have awareness to stop myself from falling back into that trip. The more back into that valley, right? It takes effort till the day I take my last breath, man.
I was someone that I listen to a lot for my real estate and everything is named Ken McElroy, and he just had a video that I saw recently, and he was talking about, a lot of people are in pursuit of wealth and success and financial freedom, that during that time they don't have that connection with their family, and then here they finally get to the point where they feel they're a success and they've reached it, but then they're distant, their kids are grown, they never really had the time, they never made the connections, and now they're at whatever age, in their 50s or whatever it is, and they don't have the kids are off doing what they're doing. The connection isn't strong. And he's saying you don't want to get like that. He said, just like what you're saying right now, you've got to try to be able to be present, when you need to be. And so, yeah, it was just, and it's so true. I've known people who's done that, and their family life suffered for their entire pursuit. And that's why I have that realization that, I catch myself, I'm more in the future than I am in the present. I'm always thinking about what I've got to do, what's going on. And yeah, just not like what is going on right now, this moment. And so,
this conversation's going on.
Exactly. And my son's grown, and, those were, I think, I briefly mentioned, those were some of my struggles and whatnot. So my connection with my son is strong. So we didn't have that distance, but I see it in some other people, and it hit home, even though, my son's grown now, but it hit home. So if you could give every listener today one intentional step that they could take away, what one thing to start breaking free from that quiet desperation, what would it be?
It would be back to what we were just talking about partially, because awareness is so key. Awareness of who we are, like where are we at, and looking at the overall picture of our life. The thing would be to listen more than you talk, even to yourself. So we always say, well, what would your 19-year-old self do, Dwight? Well, I tell myself to listen more than I talk, to be present in a conversation, so that I'm ready for the next comment, but that's not my focus. 70% of that conversation, 80% of that conversation is me listening to that person intently, so I don't miss those finite things. Well, when I say talk to yourself, do that to yourself too. Speak a truth to yourself and listen. Don't have your thoughts overriding the current thought that you're trying. Like, we can get so caught up in ourselves, and our brain is just like cycling and cycling, if this makes sense. And that we're thinking about one thing, yet our brain is also thinking about something else. We're not listening and being attentive to and aware to the current circumstance, because over here we see a piece of paper of something else we have to deal with, and we're letting that in our peripheral vision, right? Whether it's actual active or inside of our brain, we're letting those little thoughts override what we really need to focus on. So learn to focus and be aware on the one item of your life, what you're wanting to change, and give that 100% of your attention. Even if it involves you journaling, that can be something that can keep you focused. So writing down, this is what I am currently working on, right? And start writing down bullet points. Don't type on the screen necessarily. Sometimes that works for people. Other times the pen to paper is better, to keep yourself grounded and focused, so you don't have those external thoughts inside of your same brain going,
Right.
well, no, this is more important. Quit it, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a grounding mechanism. So again, for some people, maybe they can type as they're thinking, okay, this is my thought process. I want to stay on task. And I'm talking about this from reality. It helps. Even when I'm on podcasts and I record people, I'm writing bullet points constantly. And I warn people ahead of time, I'm paying attention. Why are you writing down stuff? And I'll explain to them after the fact or prior. It's because that is a trigger to keep my brain on you. To never let
Nice.
my brain go, oh my gosh, I got another call an hour from now.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
I don't know
Yeah.
if any of that made sense or was all over the place,
Yeah.
but we need to be aware of our own internal thoughts and what we are saying, and listen to ourselves just as much as I'd say, hey, I need to listen to you and be attentive, instead of getting distracted by the thing that's next, the shiny thing that's coming up next.
Well, it is. And, I had a sales career before I actually went full-time in real estate. And a book that was huge to me, and I may get this title wrong, I read it years and years ago, but it was called How to Speak, How to Listen. And the listening part, and I'm sure but a lot of people aren't aware that they're not listening. And that is such a huge problem. And when people are speaking, they're thinking what they're going to say before even really hearing what you're saying. And when I read that book and I really started putting myself in that moment and listening when someone was speaking, it really, really helped me in my sales. Because when I would hear someone speak, when I would listen to them, the words that are chosen are saying a lot of what they're thinking. And so when you're actually listening, you can hear what's really not being said, because you can realize the words that are what are being said and what led to those specific words. And it was a great book, and it really helped me start becoming more in the conversation and really taking it in. And before that book, I was completely guilty of it. Someone's talking to me, I'm ready to say what I have to say, and that was what was on my mind. But yeah, when you can actually start listening, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that are guilty of it. And if you can start really paying attention to it and really start listening when people are speaking instead of thinking what you're going to say, what a difference. So it was a great point you brought up.
How much information can we decimate between you and I if we're both thinking, I can't wait to respond?
Right.
Just ask yourself that. So by you going through what you went through and having that realization, it's not just about business and making you a better salesperson. It's making you a better father, a better friend, a better son, the list goes on. Listening is such an underutilized skill that, and I train my brain, but it doesn't mean that I don't fall off the cliff once in a while. I have to practice it. So my point is, for any of this stuff, become an active person that practices what you preach. If you notice yourself in a conversation, you can literally go, oh, geez, my brain, I'm floating everywhere and I'm not listening to this person. It might not even be about you wanting to say something next. Go into every conversation respecting that person, that the words coming out of their lips could maybe revolutionize how you're feeling, or take you on that elevation part of me of your thought process, because everybody's got something that can help, right? Everybody's got that. Maybe it's just a little emotional thing they said, not even necessarily a knowledge piece, but it affected and triggered you so that you do things differently. Always respect people and what they have to say, unless obviously it's morally apprehensive and corrupt. Walk away from that stuff. But
well, I can tell when I'm speaking to somebody, especially like contractors, people that I'm trying to delegate tasks to, and I can tell they're not listening. They're not hearing what I'm saying, and it's evident sometimes. So where can people? So anyone right now today, where can somebody connect with you, learn more, dive into your work?
Well, the easiest way to just go to giveaheck.com, right? Go to my website. It literally is a plethora of information. I continue to get it fine-tuned, but that's a plethora of information about everything that I utilize within my brand to help people, from financial planning to lifestyle coaching, my book, my podcast, my speaking. You can go in and watch little clips. You can reach out to me for a free call, like just to have hey, let's discover who each other is. Let's see if I can help you, because regardless of where you live on this planet, I can help you in the lifestyle side and the coaching financial side. I may not be able to help you do the licensing final products, but I can actually make a difference in your life on how you think about money, maybe help you get past your money mindset, your monsters, or maybe it's just the 70-30 principle and you want to work through it because you're so sick and tired of people using you as a doormat. Like this, just go to giveaheck.com. And for those that forget that, just Google Dwight Heck and you'll find, there won't be any shortage of information you can find in regards to me, because of the fact that I've been doing this long enough.
Excellent. So everybody listening, it's go to giveaheck.com. Everything is there. The book, the coaching, the podcast, the speaking. Dwight, it's been wonderful. What a lot that you've shared with us. And I look forward to connecting with you more. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share and hopefully uplift and give people the confidence that they can live a purposeful life.
Well, I think you've done that. So thank you. Thanks again.
Thanks.
No money, man.